Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Ask the Experts session for building secure apps with collaborative DevSecOps practices. My name is Jessica Dean. I'm a principal cloud advocate here at Microsoft. I focus very heavily on open source and DevOps and all things cloud native. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lavanya so that she can introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lavanya. I'm a program manager with the Azure security team. I primarily focused on container security, and now I'm working on the serverless security aspects. Over to you, Gray.
Thanks, Lavanya. Hi, everybody. I'm Gray. I'm a Senior Director of Product Management at GitHub, where I'm responsible for all of GitHub's security products. So that crosses everything that was talked about, really, in Jessica's talk, from code scanning to secret scanning to the dependable alerts. And I'll pass it over to Baz.
Thanks, Gray. I'm Baz. I'm the Director of Product for all things code security analysis at GitHub. That includes GitHub's code scanning features and CodeQL as well.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for the introductions. All right, so we're going to go ahead and kick off this Ask the Experts session with one of the questions we were asked the most during the session, which is the elephant in the room, to put it in a certain context. Azure DevOps and GitHub Actions. What features are going where? Will features be announced? To start this off and answering all these questions, I'm going to go ahead and start with Lavanya, if you want to go ahead and chime in from the Azure security perspective, and then from there we can hand it over to Gray and Baz.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jessica. Yes, indeed. So first of all, thanks so much for all that interest. We do appreciate that. We have built the feature set for GitHub, but we do plan to build the feature set for Azure DevOps as well. It was just, we feel that strategically it was important to address GitHub, but just as the Windows, Linux world, both of them mean the same, and we do plan to address and have this functionality for Azure DevOps as well. Gray, did you want to add something?
No, I'll just say that from the GitHub perspective, we're always looking to learn from Azure DevOps and to share anything that we build on the GitHub side. There are a lot of places where Azure DevOps has been a more mature tool than GitHub. And so GitHub has been taking those lessons and implementing them over the last few years. I think security is a space where, GitHub has made a really big investment, and there are places now that GitHub, is ahead. And it's our turn to share some of that knowledge back with Azure DevOps, and we hope to be able to do that in the future.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Gray. Baz, I want to give you the opportunity to comment on this as well, if you have any perspective from the security side of things within GitHub and collaboration with Azure DevOps as well.
No, I mean, Gray and Lavanya have covered the most important parts really here. I'll add here that the CodeQL analysis that we've integrated into GitHub it's really quite possible to make that work in other environments as well. So bringing that to Azure DevOps is definitely on our radar.
Awesome. Thank you very much. All right. Also, by the way, I see a comment right here. Kevin, thank you. I saw quite a few comments, enjoyed engaging with you during the session itself. I'm going to go ahead and start off with a question for Baz, now that we got the elephant in the room out of the way. Baz, what languages, since you mentioned CodeQL, what languages does CodeQL support, and which language support may not currently exist, but is coming next?
Wow, that's a really good question. The current language support for CodeQL is actually really quite broad already. We've got most of the C languages covered, so that's C, C++, and C# as well, of course. We have Go fully covered, Java, JavaScript, Python, and TypeScript. And now I'm just going to double check. I think I got them all, but what I'm going to add to that now is we've just shipped Ruby analysis in beta. And I'm going to have to remind myself of that every single time I talk about this, because I'm going to forget that one. So Ruby analysis just shipped in public beta on GitHub, and we're currently working hard on our mobile support. So that's Kotlin and Swift, and we're going to ship those somewhere next calendar year.
Awesome. That's awesome. I see another question in the chat, which conveniently was one of my next personal questions. So we talk a lot about containers, right? And containers very heavily are Linux focused typically. Lavanya, this is a question for you. When will scanning support come for Windows container images? And what, like, I guess, what would that entail? What does that look like? I'm assuming it would come to GitHub Action Support or Azure Security Center first. I'm going to open the floor for you to answer that.
Yeah, great question, Jessica. Yes, this feature is now in active development as we speak, and we expect to preview this feature sometime in CY22, the H1 CY22, so earlier next year.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you very much. And Gray, I have a question for you here. Regarding GitHub Advanced Security, what is coming next from a very broad perspective, or you're welcome to get granular if you prefer?
Wow, yeah. I mean, there's a lot, basically. We have a big team working across this. So a lot of things, the GitHub roadmap is mostly public, so you can check that out at github.com/GitHub/roadmap. The thing that I'm most excited about in advanced security, I think, is a change to secret scanning that we're going to ship next year to allow you to prevent secrets from getting pushed to GitHub in the first place. So Jessica, you demoed the alerts that we show you in secret scanning after a secret has been leaked. We want all of our security products to become preventative rather than remediative. And for secret scanning, that means when somebody goes to make a push to GitHub, if they've got an Azure storage key in there, we want to reject that push and say, hey, looks like you're committing an Azure storage key. You probably don't want to do that. If you really do want to do it, you can override. But most of the time, like 99 times out of 100, that's not going to be a good idea. It would give anybody who has read access to this repo potentially write access to your production environment. That's not good. So that change from going from, you know, a remediative tool to a preventative one on secret scanning, I think that's probably the next big thing we've got coming in advanced security. But there are so many other things as well across security overview, some of the work that Baz talked about with like Kotlin and Swift coming to CodeQL, a lot of the things that we're doing in the supply chain space where we're starting to address security at the registry level. We want to reduce the number of vulnerabilities that are making it into ecosystems like NPM in the first place. We've got a lot going on and it's hard to pick.
Awesome, awesome. And another question along the lines of GitHub Advanced Security, but something that might also tie into Lavanya's expertise. Are there plans coming for container scanning integration direct with GitHub Advanced Security? So currently what we showed in the demo, just to make sure that was clear, is we're using GitHub Actions and we're using a task for the container scan task. That leverages things like Trivy and Dockle to do those scans for us, but it requires kind of that manual definition. Will we have innate or integrated support by default at any point in time? Lavanya, I'll start with you real quick in case you want to chime in, and then I'll let you pass it over to Gray.
I'm actually not too familiar on where that is from my end, so probably I'm going to rely on Gray for that.
That's absolutely fine, Lavanya. The reason you're not familiar is it's not on our roadmap, public or private. So we do want to get to it within advanced security, but we have a lot of ground to cover beforehand, which is why we're really kind of like, grateful for the work, that your team have done and for the Microsoft expertise on container scanning and embedding that within our existing tooling on GitHub is a pretty good intermediate solution. Now, in the long term, we'd love for GitHub to be able to scan any images that you're storing on the GitHub container registry and to be able to alert you of any changes that happen there and to make that container scanning product really native. And when we do that, we'll be looking to learn a bunch from the existing Microsoft scanning logic. We'll basically be looking to take that engine and embed the UI within GitHub natively. But that's a way off. It's not on the public roadmap, and normally when I'm saying that, that means it's not something that we're going to do at GitHub over the next 12 months. And if you ask me at Ignite again in 2022, I'm sure I'll have an answer that's a little bit more concrete in terms of timelines.
Awesome, awesome. Another set of questions that we got frequently throughout our session had to do with cost and pricing. So Gray, Boz, these questions will probably be for you. I'll let you share amongst yourself. But what security features are included at no cost, maybe for public repos or open source projects? And then what features are available with a GitHub Advanced Security or enterprise license? Gray, I'll start with you first, and then I'll let you hand it over to Boz.
Yeah, I can take that one. So, I mean, GitHub has a lot of security features, and I don't just want to go through them line by line. So let me tell you the philosophy instead. GitHub really believes in giving everything that we do in security away for free to all public repositories. Now, there are occasions where that's not possible or it's not appropriate, but as a general philosophy, anything that we're building, unless there is a really good reason, and that's unlikely to be a commercial reason, it's likely to be a scale reason, we want to give away to all public repos. So everything that we do in code scanning, everything Baz has talked about with CodeQL, everything that we do in secret scanning, and everything that we do in supply chain security, we make all of that free, or we have plans to make all of it free in the very near term. So, and that's a philosophical position. GitHub is the home of open source, and we really believe that it's our responsibility to help keep that ecosystem safe and secure. We want anybody to be able to consume open source safely, and that means keeping the production of it safe and keeping the consumption of it safe. Then if you want to use GitHub's more sophisticated security features on your private repositories, some of them are paid and some of them are free. So our supply chain features, the base features like Dependabot that tell you that you're relying on a vulnerable dependency, that is free on any private repository. And in fact, the data that underlines that, the GitHub advisory database, that is free even if you're not using GitHub. And again, that's this philosophical position of this data is created by maintainers. We do not believe that GitHub or anybody else really has a right to sell that. We want to make that free. We want to amplify the effect of those open source maintainers. And anybody that's consuming open source, we want to make that easy to do. So we believe in giving you basic scanning of your open source dependencies on private repos for free. But the more sophisticated tooling that we're building now, the stuff that Baz will talk about with code scanning, and the stuff around secret scanning and doing that on private repositories, those we think are value added security features, and those we do charge for. Baz, do you want to say any more about code scanning and CodeQL?
I think you got it absolutely right, Gray, but I will add something to that. Code scanning and CodeQL are not just free to use on open source repositories. We actually also ask for contributions from that community who use code scanning and CodeQL. So if you have security knowledge, then you can contribute that back to the code scanning and CodeQL community by creating a pull request in our open source CodeQL repository. And that way, other people in the community can make use of your security knowledge. So that's a real sort of community effort there. We're giving that to the community, and the community gives back to us.
Awesome. Thank you very much. It seems like just when everyone was talking, my camera got so excited about all of this information that it stopped feeding the video feed. So I apologize for anyone who can't see me at the moment, but hopefully you can still hear me. We have a few other questions here. Let me just scroll down because I was trying to troubleshoot the camera, so it's going to give me a second to find some. One question right here has to do again with Azure DevOps, and I think we're going to see a few of these types of questions that revolve around Azure DevOps, solely because we still have a fair mix of people who are going to host code on GitHub itself and those who are already heavily invested in Azure DevOps itself. I'm going to open this up to Lavanya maybe to comment. I know you worked on the security team, but what DevSecOps features will be available for organizations using Azure DevOps, or what security features are available right now that customers can take advantage of?
So the current feature set that we talked about in the session and the demo is involving around vulnerability scanning for CI/CD, right? So this gives an opportunity for customers to learn about vulnerabilities present in their container images before they're basically pushed into, registries. So they're kind of, this is all around the shift left security kind of scenarios. So that's the feature set that we do plan to add on for the Azure DevOps as well. And there are other kind of scanning capabilities that we do plan to address eventually, like credential scanning, malware scanning, and so on. And this is not only contained to container world, like we'll be kind of working on these kind of feature set across other cloud native workloads as well.
Awesome. Awesome. So just to kind of recap for everyone, there are security features you can take advantage of. Security is in flight and is actively being worked on. And let's go ahead and just move through the list. I think some of these questions kind of have been answered, but for anyone who's joined maybe after the fact, I just want to recap on this. One question was from Kevin. Will we see some kind of linting for security features like hard-coded passwords or identity information as part of the pre-push security checks? And Gray, correct me if I'm mistaken, I believe that's kind of what you were talking about as far as being preventative when it comes to security checks and that kind of secret scanning as opposed to being reactive, so that you're able to check those hard-coded passwords, right?
Yes, absolutely. So with GitHub secret scanning, it ships with a set of default patterns. Those tend to be for very highly identifiable token types. So with a change that's coming out very soon to Azure storage keys, we can identify them with essentially 0 false positives. That's a perfect candidate to put into a push protection. You can also write your own custom patterns with secret scanning. So with something like looking for a generic password, or if you have a particular format of personally identifiable information, then you could write a custom pattern to scan for those. And we are going to allow you to use those custom patterns as push protections. Now, for anything that you do make a push protection, I'm going to put this caveat now, which is like, you really, really need to have a very low false positive rate. As you move the triage of potential secrets from out of the security team and into the developer workflow, you move to a flow where developers have to triage those one by one. And so a high false positive rate that might be acceptable to a security team isn't going to be acceptable to individual developers. If some large number of their pushes are blocked and 50% of the time it's a false positive, you're going to have trouble keeping that developer team wanting to use that system. So we do say anything you put into a push protection, you just have to make sure that the false positive rate on it is very low. But for the default patterns that GitHub will ship push protections with, that's exactly the dynamic that you'll have. And for any of the Azure services, we're going to make sure that you've got credentials there that are highly identifiable and can be blocked in push protection.
Awesome. Now, a question for that in regards to the Azure DevOps part, once that feature does exist, will that support from if you're using GitHub repositories with Azure DevOps, or will that also support Azure DevOps repos?
So to start with, on push protections and secret scanning, all of that is going to be embedded pretty deep into GitHub itself. Okay. As you can imagine, this is the case that when you write git push, we run a bunch of commit hooks. In this case, it is a pre-receive hook that runs, and we do our scanning at that time and then reject that push. Now, I am super interested in getting to the point where Azure DevOps can support the same kind of functionality. We're not working on that right now, but as I said earlier, the expertise that my teams that I work with build up as they build this, we want to pass that on to Azure DevOps. It comes back to that earlier conversation where the big strategic investment, the biggest features are going to ship on GitHub first, but as we continue to build, we're going to be passing those along, and you should be seeing those in Azure DevOps over the longer term as well.
Awesome, awesome. Boz, I guess one question for you. So you are the security expert, and in our session during the demo, you were also the developer that accidentally injected SQL injection into our code. But what tips do you have from a DevSecOps perspective for customers that are just now starting to shift left in security and in their thinking? What tips from a security expert do you have that they can start either implementing or mulling around in their heads?
Oh, wow, that's a big question. I think to me, what I think is important is that we make security so far left that security is really at the front of the minds of all developers. Security is no longer something that AppSec teams should be thinking about exclusively. It's something that everyone should be thinking about. So when it comes to GitHub, we're a developer-first company, right? And we therefore need to make sure that all of our tools, all of our security tools are available to developers. But not just that. We need to make sure that both developers and AppSec teams can collaborate on that security together. So developers care about pull requests, developers care about code in their own repositories, and we need to make sure that we help them create the safest and most secure code they can. And AppSec teams were helping to make sure they can keep that that overview of risk on their entire portfolio. And with GitHub, with our security features, we're trying to help these two teams work very closely together. Does that answer your question, Jessica?
It does. And you know what, I love what you said in the beginning, that you have to shift so far left that security is important to everyone. Personally, I've been passionate about security for years, since, and my background is predominantly more from an operations perspective. So when I talk to people about security at conferences and events and customer meetings, you always hear like one half of the room breathe a deep sigh of relief, like, that's not my concern. Like, my code's perfect. I've already done all my security concerns. Or operations are of the mindset of, I've already locked everything down. My stuff's secure. But everyone always thinks it's the other person's job, when in reality, security is everyone's responsibility. And I think it does start with shifting so far left where it just becomes ingrained in every aspect of thinking, whether you're from the developer side, operations side, security side, or beyond. So I loved that. Another question that has to deal outside of security, but has to deal with automated testing. So still doing validation checks. What would be the GitHub recommended way of using automated testing with GitHub Enterprise or GitHub Advanced Security? Gray, I'm going to open that up for you.
Yeah, sure thing. So if you're running any of the enterprise server instances above 3.0, then you've got access to GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions is, our native CI/CD solution. So that's the platform that we really recommend that you run your tests on with enterprise. Now, we understand that for a lot of customers that have been, running on server for a long time, they've probably got their own existing setups for that. So everything that we build at GitHub that is intended to run in a build environment can run on other ones as well. So, if you're using Jenkins or something else, then that's absolutely fine too. And everything in the code scanning and code QL space will run on that just as well.
Awesome, thank you. And I see one question here that actually I can answer. And again, for anyone who's maybe joined late, I apologize for not being able to see me on camera. My camera got so excited about this particular session that it stopped working because everyone else on screen has a much better background than I do. But this particular question is, since all features come first to GitHub, is there anything in the pipeline to use Azure DevOps with GitHub instead of Azure repos? And actually, yes, with Azure DevOps, you do not have to use Azure repos. You can connect your GitHub account over to your Azure DevOps or Azure Pipelines account. It's just a service connection. And you can then pull your code from GitHub and even set automatic triggers. So it'll kind of still be that seamless integration. Lavanya, here's a question for you. If I'm interested in getting scanning, CI/CD scanning with Azure Defender and with Azure Security Center, what license do I need?
Oh, I believe this is actually with the Defender for containers. So you'll have to enable that on your subscription, and that's how you would get this feature as part of the of your vulnerability scanning for CI/CD.
Awesome, awesome. Gray, I have another question for you. It seems there's a lot of GitHub questions, so I'm just going to keep throwing them your way. As GitHub Enterprise gets adopted more and more by co-located agile teams, are there plans to move features like Azure Boards and Jira over to GitHub Enterprise?
It's a good question. I would really highly recommend that you take a look at the GitHub Universe keynotes that went out last week. It's mercifully short. It's only 15 minutes, so it's not a big commitment. And in there's a bunch of time spent on what we've called Issues V2, which is basically a reimagining of GitHub issues to bring a lot more power. And a lot of that is based on the learnings that folks like Mario Rodriguez, who were intimately involved in the Azure Boards build, have brought to GitHub. So Mario is the VP of product that is responsible for all the things GitHub is doing with issues now. And yes, there's a big investment there to bring across a lot of that knowledge and a lot of functionality across from Azure Boards. Jira is obviously a competitor. I wish we could bring across all the functionality from them. Clearly, for a lot of enterprises, that is a fantastic solution. But what we're doing on Issues V Next, I think, is going to provide the functionality that you need.
Awesome, thank you. And we're almost at time here. We have 4 more minutes. We have a few more minutes for questions. If you have any other burning questions, please go ahead and ask them. But one question right here, I'm going to start with Lavanya, but Gray, you also might want to chime in as well. This question again is from Kevin. Are there public numbers you can share or link to in relation to the number of public repositories currently using containers versus maybe a traditional app service like Azure App Service, not actually running their code in a container, deployments that are being scanned in GitHub? So I think the question is, are there public numbers as far as what is being scanned in GitHub? How popular is that? Are customers moving away from traditional over into the container world? Lavanya, I don't know if you have direct numbers or if you've Okay, figured we'd ask that. Gray, I don't know if you've seen anything as far as people really kind of moving more over into the container space and away from traditional.
No, Kevin, we're going to need to take that one offline. I'm afraid you have exhausted my cross GitHub knowledge. That one's outside of my security wheelhouse, but we will make sure to follow up.
Okay, this one may be for Boz. It mentions vulnerabilities, and since Boz is the security expert, I'll start with him. Will someone who is interested in using Copilot, will they have vulnerabilities if they use Copilot to write their code?
What a fantastic question. Let me say that I'll do the typical PM response here, and I'll say it depends. It depends because many vulnerabilities are a product of intricate data flow, where you see a piece of untrusted user data flowing into an application, flowing through an application, and being used somewhere in a way that's unsanitized. And you can think of a SQL injection vulnerability in that way, or cross-site scripting in that way. It's all about untrusted user data flowing into a dangerous place. Now, if you've written your Node application and have used Copilot to route some of that data through your application, then yes, the Copilot generated code will be on the path of that vulnerability. Was Copilot responsible for the vulnerability? Probably not. So it depends.
I love that answer. I feel like that's a very typical answer just in tech. You can ask something and it really does depend, right? What works well for you and your enterprise and your customer story and what you're ultimately trying to accomplish may drastically differ from somebody else and their story and what they're ultimately trying to accomplish and thus deliver. All right, we have 2 more minutes. What I'm going to do is something a little bit unique. I'm going to go through all of our 3 panelists. By the way, thank you very much, Gray, Lavanya, and Boz, for your time today. I'm going to go through and give you 20 seconds or so to maybe chime in anything else that you want the audience to know. Lavanya, I'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, because this did come up sometimes with my interactions with customers, is what is the tooling that we're using for vulnerability scanning at CI/CD? The tool right now that we're using is Trivy, and the tool that we're using for registry scanning is Qualys. And we do have plans eventually to integrate with other scanning tools at CI/CD.
Awesome. Gray, anything you want to add?
I will just say that GitHub's whole philosophy here, and the one that I hope resonates with everybody that's watched Jessica's demo, is about embedding security deep in that developer workflow. We've seen amazing results from doing that with one of our products, which is Dependabot, which no longer just creates alerts for vulnerabilities in your supply chain, but creates the pull request that Jessica showed you. The difference in resolve rates at any point of time when you get a pull request rather than just an email is dramatic. We've seen it halve the mean time to resolve for dependency vulnerabilities, and that's why we're applying that same logic everywhere else. So if you take one thing from this, I would hope that it is that embedding security deep in the developer workflow really works.
Awesome. And then Buzz, I think we're at time. So if you just want to take 7 seconds or 10 seconds and chime in.
I'll keep it super short. There's a bounty program that you can make use of if you have security knowledge that you want to share with the community. We'll pay you for contributing a CodeQL query. So have a look at the GitHub Security Lab and the CodeQL repository.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for all your questions. Thank you for hanging out with us today, and enjoy the rest of your Microsoft Ignite. Cheers, everyone.